It started with an empty house and the sound of rain tapping against the windows. I had no reason to believe it would be anything other than ordinary. Another evening in the routine of our lives, quietly drifting into a predictable lull. But life, I've learned, has a way of setting things in motion without any warning. You don't always notice the small shifts until the ground beneath you starts to tremble. I'd gotten home from work around 7 p.m. The house was silent, as usual, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I stood in the entryway, my briefcase still in hand, and for the first time in what felt like months, I noticed something strange. There was no immediate rush to greet me. No sign of her presence. Nothing to indicate she was in the middle of something. Normally, she'd be somewhere. Maybe the kitchen, maybe reading in the living room. But tonight, there was just nothing. I set my things down and called out, "Grace." My voice echoed through the empty hallway. No response. I walked through the rooms, expecting to find her somewhere. But it wasn't like last time, when she was lost in a book or watching a show on her laptop. Tonight, the absence was thicker somehow. It wasn't panic yet, but it was unsettling. I checked the kitchen. Empty. I moved on to the bedroom. No Grace. I tried the bathroom, then the laundry room. Not a trace. My stomach dropped a little, but I didn't want to let the worry take hold. Maybe she had stepped out. Maybe she was out with friends. She had every right to do that. But as I stood in the living room, I began to notice things that didn't sit right. Her keys were still on the counter. Her coat, usually draped over the chair by the front door, was missing. And the biggest oddity, her phone was sitting on the couch. No purse, no jacket, no explanation. I tried to dismiss the feeling in my gut. Maybe she had gone for a walk or to the store. But something felt different this time. It was too quiet, too still. My mind raced. Did she forget her phone? Did something happen? My fingers hovered over her phone, but I stopped myself. It wasn't my place to go snooping. Instead, I sent her a text. "Hey, where are you? Everything okay?" The message sent, but I didn't get an immediate response. That was odd, too. Normally, she'd reply quickly. Another 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Still nothing. I sat down on the couch, waiting. I looked at the phone again, tempted to check it, but I resisted. After all, she'd probably just run out for a minute, right? Then my phone buzzed. But it wasn't a reply from Grace. It was an unknown number. It could have been a wrong number, a telemarketer, or something trivial. But for some reason, I felt a tightening in my chest as I opened the message. "She's not coming back tonight. Don't wait up." I read it once, twice, my eyes struggling to comprehend what was staring back at me. The message was short, blunt, and somehow knowing. It wasn't just some prank or mistake. It was deliberate. And more chilling than the message itself was the sender's confidence. I had no idea who it was. My fingers trembled as I tried to process it. I immediately tried calling Grace. Twice. No answer. The ringing went on longer than usual, then went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Then once more, and again. Nothing. My mind was spiraling. I felt like I was drowning in an ocean of questions with no answers. What was going on? Where was she? And who was this person who knew so much? The house, which had been so familiar just an hour ago, now felt like a foreign place. The walls seemed to close in on me, the silence almost suffocating. Something was very wrong. The minutes dragged on as I sat there, staring at her phone. I felt trapped, caught between the desperate need for answers and the overwhelming uncertainty of what I was about to uncover. My fingers hovered over the device, unsure if I should check it, if I should invade her privacy. But the message, "She's not coming back tonight. Don't wait up," haunted me, gnawing at my mind, leaving me with a sick feeling in the pit of my stomach. I had no idea who the message was from, but it didn't matter. Whoever it was clearly knew something I didn't. I picked up the phone, my hand trembling slightly. I debated for a moment before unlocking it. A part of me hoped it was some kind of mistake, maybe one of her friends playing a prank, or even just a random number. But as I scanned her recent texts, my heart sank. There were no messages from her. No recent conversations. The last one was from earlier that morning, confirming the dinner plans we talked about. There was nothing, absolutely nothing, that could explain the message I had just received. I set the phone back down, feeling dizzy with confusion. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't a random event. The tone of the message was too deliberate, too knowing. It felt like it was coming from someone who had been watching, waiting, anticipating something. Maybe even her. The longer I thought about it, the more I felt like I was caught in a game where the rules kept changing and I didn't even know who was playing. I stood up, pacing back and forth in the living room. The silence in the house was deafening. I should have known something was off when she hadn't answered my earlier texts or calls. But that strange message had twisted everything. I glanced around the room, searching for some sign, some clue. But the house felt eerily untouched, too perfect, too normal. Then it hit me, her coat. The one she always left by the door. It was gone. My heart skipped a beat as I rushed to the door, pulling it open. There was nothing. No sign of her at all. No sign of where she could have gone, or who might have taken her. The street outside was empty, save for the streetlights flickering in the distance. I stood there for a moment, lost in thought. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of what was happening. It didn't feel like a simple disappearance. It felt like she had left in a hurry, as if something, or someone, had made her go. And I was being left in the dark, forced to piece together the puzzle from the scraps that had been left behind. I turned back inside and grabbed my car keys, the urge to find her growing stronger. I had to know where she was. I had to understand what was going on. There was no way I could just sit around and wait. I couldn't let her slip away without knowing why. But where to start? The office? The bar we occasionally went to after work? My thoughts were interrupted when the phone buzzed again. This time, the number was familiar. It was from her work. I quickly answered, my pulse quickening. "Hello," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hi, is this Michael?" The voice on the other end sounded strange, distant. "Yes, this is Michael. Is everything okay? Have you seen Grace? She's not answering her phone, and I've been trying to reach her." There was a pause, and I could hear a shuffle of papers in the background. "Actually, we were hoping you could tell us. We haven't seen her all day, either. She hasn't responded to any of her messages or calls. We were just about to call you." The blood drained from my face. "What do you mean? She hasn't shown up for work today?" "No, she didn't. And she didn't inform anyone she was taking the day off. We're really worried. Have you heard from her at all?" I had no words. I could barely form a sentence. "No, I haven't. Not since this morning. We'll keep trying to reach her, but please, if you hear anything, let us know. We'll do the same." The call ended abruptly, and I was left standing there in a state of disbelief. How could she have just vanished like this? No one had heard from her. Her coworkers were worried. But what was even stranger was that I hadn't heard a word about any issues at work. She was always punctual, always on top of things. This wasn't like her. With every passing second, the sense of urgency grew. I had to find her, whatever it took. But my mind kept returning to the message. "She's not coming back tonight. Don't wait up." It felt like a warning. But a warning from whom? And why was I the one left in the dark? I quickly grabbed my jacket, ready to head out. But just as I was about to leave, something caught my eye. A small, folded piece of paper sitting on the coffee table, tucked beneath her notebook. I didn't remember seeing it there earlier. With a trembling hand, I unfolded it. It was a note, written in a hurried, messy script. "I'm sorry, but this is the only way. You'll understand soon." I stared at the words, my breath catching in my throat. What the hell did that mean? I stood frozen, staring at the small note in my hands. "I'm sorry, but this is the only way. You'll understand soon." The words burned into my mind like a brand. What could it possibly mean? Why would she leave me a note like this, especially now, when everything seemed to be falling apart? I reread it again, feeling a sinking feeling in my chest. It didn't make any sense. I folded the note back up and stuffed it into my pocket, then paced the room, running my hands through my hair. There was no time for second-guessing. The urgency of the situation was overwhelming. If she was out there, if she had left without a word, without a trace, it meant that something far more serious was happening than I had initially thought. I couldn't just sit around waiting for answers anymore. I grabbed my car keys and stormed out the door, determined to find her. As I stepped into the cold night air, the rain had picked up, drenching the street in a cold, relentless downpour. The city was eerily quiet, the only sounds being the hiss of tires on wet pavement and the occasional gust of wind. My mind raced, the uncertainty clouding my thoughts. Where would she have gone? And why didn't she tell me anything? It felt like everything we had built over the past few years was slipping away, bit by bit. I drove aimlessly at first, not knowing where to go, but my gut kept pulling me back to her office. It seemed the most logical place to start, even though the conversation with her coworker had only added to the mystery. Why hadn't anyone heard from her all day? Why hadn't she even shown up for work? The more I thought about it, the more the pieces didn't fit. As I approached her office building, the lights in the parking lot flickered against the dark, wet landscape. I parked and walked briskly towards the entrance. The doors were locked. I tried calling the security office, but there was no answer. Frustrated, I stood there for a moment, watching the rain cascade down the windows, each drop seemingly adding to the mounting pressure I was feeling. But then, I noticed something. There was a light on in one of the windows on the second floor, her office. I couldn't explain why, but something about the sight made my heart race. It was as though I was being drawn there, like I had no choice but to follow the faint trail that had been left behind. I decided to take a chance. I jogged around the building to the back entrance, hoping that maybe I could find another way in. My breath was shallow as I moved through the darkness, each step carrying me further into the unknown. My mind was reeling with questions I had no answers to. Who had left me the message? Why did she leave the note? And why was she acting so distant? I reached the back door and tested the handle. It opened. I stepped inside, the air cool and musty, like the building hadn't been used in days. The silence was oppressive, and the only sound was the soft echo of my footsteps as I moved down the corridor. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me out of my thoughts. I pulled it out, hoping it was a text from Grace. But when I saw the name on the screen, my stomach dropped. It was the unknown number again. I hesitated for a moment, unsure if I wanted to pick up, but something told me I had to. "Hello," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. A long pause followed, and then a voice I didn't recognize spoke, slow, deliberate, almost too calm. "She's not coming back, Michael. Not this time." My breath caught in my throat. I stood still, trying to steady my racing heart. "Who is this? What do you mean she's not coming back? Where is she?" "You'll understand soon enough," the voice continued, its tone cold and detached. "But for now, it's best if you don't search for her. You wouldn't like what you find." I felt a chill run down my spine. My mind was reeling, trying to make sense of what was happening. "What are you talking about? Where is she?" I demanded, but the voice on the other end only laughed softly. "Too late, Michael. You've already missed your chance." Then, the line went dead. I stood there for a long moment, the phone still pressed to my ear, staring into the darkness of the building around me. My mind was swirling with confusion and fear. What had just happened? What was that supposed to mean? I glanced up at the second-floor window again. The light was still on, but now, there was something else, a shadow, moving behind the blinds. A figure, dark and indistinct. My breath caught in my throat as I took a hesitant step forward. What the hell was going on? What had I gotten myself into? Before I could even process what I was seeing, the shadow disappeared. It was gone, and I was left standing there in the cold silence, more lost than ever. The questions I had before were now multiplied, and I realized with a sinking feeling that I wasn't going to find the answers I was looking for here. I turned back to the door, knowing I needed to leave before I made any more rash decisions. But as I stepped outside, a voice, Grace's voice, echoed through my mind. "You'll understand soon." The words repeated over and over again, like a haunting refrain. I didn't know what was happening, but I was about to find out, whether I was ready or not. I couldn't shake the words from my mind. "You'll understand soon enough." They echoed through my thoughts, gnawing at me as I stood in the damp, empty parking lot, trying to process the chilling phone call. Whoever this was, they knew more than they were letting on. But why didn't they just tell me? Why all the cryptic nonsense? I could feel the frustration building inside me, mixing with the fear and confusion that had become constant companions over the last few hours. I had to keep moving. I had to keep searching. But where? I stood there, staring at the ground, the rain now just a soft mist against my skin, before an idea struck me. If the office hadn't given me anything concrete, maybe there was another place to check. A place I hadn't thought of yet, her favorite coffee shop. It was a small, cozy place in the middle of the city, the kind of place where the staff knew her by name, where she spent hours working on her laptop or just reading a book. I hadn't thought to check there until now. I started the car and drove across town, my mind still racing with the conversation I'd had on the phone. "She's not coming back." Those words kept repeating in my head, haunting me. I didn't know who was behind it, but the tone of their voice, cold, almost like they were enjoying the situation, sent shivers down my spine. Whoever they were, They knew exactly how to push my buttons. I had to find Grace. I had to know what had happened to her. As I pulled into the parking lot of the coffee shop, I noticed something strange. There was a car parked in the corner, one that I didn't recognize. It wasn't unusual for people to stop by for a quick drink, but something about the car made my pulse quicken. It was newer, sleek, definitely not the kind of car Grace would drive. I parked my car and headed inside, my eyes scanning the room for any sign of her. The coffee shop was quieter than usual, a few people sitting at tables, absorbed in their laptops or books. No sign of Grace. I walked up to the counter, the barista behind the counter giving me a friendly smile. "Hi, how can I help you?" she asked. "Have you seen Grace tonight?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "She comes in here a lot, and I—" The barista cut me off, her face suddenly losing its warm expression. "Oh, you mean the woman who came in earlier?" she asked, her voice lowering. "She left about an hour ago. With someone." My heart skipped a beat. "With someone? Who?" I asked, trying to keep my composure. The barista hesitated for a moment, glancing at the door as if expecting someone to walk in. "I'm not sure," she said finally, "but it looked like they knew each other. She seemed, I don't know, a little distant, maybe distracted. She wasn't herself, if that makes sense." "Was she acting strange?" I pressed, my voice trembling now. I had to know more. The barista nodded slowly. "Yeah, she seemed off. Like, I don't know, almost like she was in a hurry. She was gone pretty quickly, and the guy, he was just as anxious as she was." I could feel my stomach tightening. The knot of uncertainty in my gut had turned into something worse. Grace never behaved like this, not with anyone. But now, there was someone else involved. Someone I didn't know. Someone who had gotten her to leave in a hurry. Did they leave together in the same car? I asked, the words barely escaping my mouth as I tried to control the surge of panic. The barista looked uneasy, as if she wasn't sure she should be telling me any of this. "I think so," she said softly. "But, look, I don't know anything for sure. I didn't get a good look at him. He was in a hurry too, I guess." I nodded, forcing myself to smile, even though my mind was racing. "Thanks," I muttered, trying to sound casual as I backed away from the counter. My heart was pounding in my chest, and every step I took felt like it brought me closer to something I wasn't prepared to face. As I left the coffee shop, I glanced once more at the car parked in the corner. It was still there, empty now, but the sense of dread I felt was undeniable. There was no doubt about it. This was connected to Grace. Whoever this guy was, he was a part of something that didn't make sense. He was part of this twisted puzzle I couldn't solve. I pulled out of the parking lot, my mind racing. I needed answers. I needed to know who this person was, and more importantly, I needed to know why Grace had gotten in that car. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I drove through the night, the rain now pounding harder against the windshield. Where was she? What was happening to her? And who was behind all of this? The questions were piling up faster than I could answer them. And yet, with every unanswered call, every unknown message, I felt like I was getting closer to a truth I wasn't ready to hear. The drive felt endless, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized how little I actually knew about Grace. What was she hiding? What had she been hiding all along? The car in the coffee shop parking lot, the phone call, the note. All of these pieces were connected somehow, and I had to find a way to put them together before it was too late. The drive to nowhere felt like it took forever. The rain seemed to beat harder on my windshield, blurring the world around me as my mind tried to piece together the chaos that was unfolding. The more I thought about Grace, the more I thought about everything that had happened, the more it felt like I was chasing a ghost. Nothing made sense. Everything I thought I knew about her seemed to be slipping through my fingers. I had always considered us a team, a couple that had weathered every storm together. But now, it felt like I was standing in the middle of a storm that had no end. I couldn't get the image of her leaving the coffee shop with that man out of my head. The barista's words haunted me. She was distant, distracted, like she was in a hurry. It didn't add up. Grace wasn't like that. She wasn't the type of person who would just slip away with a stranger without so much as a word. There had to be something more, something deeper behind all of this. I found myself driving aimlessly, the city streets turning into an endless blur. I didn't even realize where I was going until I turned onto a familiar street. The old apartment building where Grace had lived before we got married. It had been her place for years, a small one-bedroom unit on the top floor. I hadn't been there in months, but something inside me told me to stop. Maybe it was because it was one of the few places I felt like I could still find some connection to the past. Before everything got so tangled up, I parked in front of the building and sat there for a moment, staring at the faded sign. My heart thudded in my chest, unsure if I was doing the right thing. But I had to know. I had to figure out what was really going on. I couldn't just keep driving in circles, lost in a sea of questions. I needed answers. The building looked different now, more worn down than I remembered. The paint was chipped, the windows fogged with age. I walked through the lobby, the smell of old wood and dust filling the air. The elevator creaked as I pressed the button for the top floor. When I stepped off, everything felt strangely silent. The hallway seemed abandoned, like the rest of the world had forgotten about this place. But I remembered it well. Grace's apartment was the last one on the left. As I approached the door, I felt a sudden sense of dread wash over me. It was like stepping into another world, one where the reality I had known with Grace no longer existed. I hesitated for a moment, my hand hovering over the doorbell. What was I doing here? Why was I really here? Before I could make up my mind, the door opened. It was Grace. But this wasn't the Grace I knew. She looked different, distracted, disheveled. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying, and her hair was messy, falling out of place in a way I'd never seen before. For a second, we just stared at each other, neither of us saying a word. The silence was thick, almost suffocating. "What are you doing here, Michael?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I needed to talk to you," I stammered. "What's going on? Where have you been? Who was that guy you were with earlier?" Her face tightened, and she stepped back, looking over her shoulder nervously. "I don't think this is a good time," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I couldn't let her shut me out, not this time. I stepped forward, blocking her from closing the door. "Grace, please. You've been distant for days now. And then the note, the phone call, everything. It doesn't make sense. What's going on?" She hesitated for a moment, then looked away. "You don't understand, Michael. You don't know everything." "Then make me understand," I shouted, the frustration bubbling over. "I love you. I thought I knew you, but now it feels like I'm chasing a stranger. What are you hiding from me?" Her eyes flashed with something I couldn't quite place. Fear? Anger? A mixture of both? She took a deep breath, and for a moment, I thought she might say something that would make all of this make sense. But instead, she turned away from me, stepping back into the apartment. "Just leave, Michael," she said softly. "It's too late. You can't fix this." I stood there for a second, feeling the weight of her words crush me. Too late. What did she mean? Was she telling me that everything between us was over? That she had already made a decision without me? Before I could respond, the door slammed shut in my face. I was left standing in the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest, my mind spiraling. What had just happened? What was she trying to tell me? The person I had known, the woman I had married, was slipping further and further away, and I didn't know how to stop it. I stepped back from the door, feeling like I had just witnessed something I wasn't supposed to see. I didn't know how to fix this, but I had to try. I had to get answers, because the more I thought about it, the more I realized something wasn't right. And I wasn't about to let her go without knowing the truth. I turned and walked back to my car, my mind racing with questions. The man in the coffee shop, the cryptic message, the strange behavior. It all felt like pieces of a puzzle I couldn't put together. But I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just some random series of events. There was something bigger at play, something I had to uncover before it was too late. I started the engine and drove off, my heart heavy with doubt and fear. But I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. I didn't know where to go after leaving Grace's apartment. The overwhelming sense of helplessness was suffocating, but I couldn't just walk away from this. I wasn't going to let it all slip away without knowing the truth. My mind was a whirlwind of questions. Why had she shut me out? Why was she acting this way? Why did she look so different? Her eyes. There had been something there, something dark and hidden, something that told me I wasn't seeing the full picture. As I drove aimlessly, the weight of everything began to crash down on me. I had been so sure of us, of our life together. But now, it felt like I was trapped in a nightmare, unable to wake up. It was like every answer I thought I had was now a lie. The man at the coffee shop, the mysterious phone call, the cryptic note. It all connected somehow, but I couldn't see how. What had Grace gotten herself into? What was I missing? The city streets seemed to stretch endlessly, the neon lights casting an eerie glow on everything around me. I didn't even know what I was hoping to find. Maybe a clue, maybe a way to make sense of it all. But I was running out of options, and the longer I waited, the more it felt like I was losing her. The silence between us had become a chasm, and I didn't know how to bridge it. Then my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number again. I felt a tight knot in my stomach as I looked at the screen. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should ignore it, but something inside told me I had to pick up. Maybe this would be the call that would finally give me the answers I was looking for. "Hello," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though I could feel my heart racing. The voice on the other end was calm, almost too calm. "Michael," the person said, the tone sending a chill through my body. "I think you've been asking all the wrong questions." "Who is this?" I demanded, my grip tightening on the steering wheel. "What do you want from me?" There was a pause. Then the voice spoke again, slower this time. "I don't want anything from you. But you're getting too close, Michael. You're starting to figure things out, and that's a problem." A cold shiver ran down my spine. What the hell is going on? Where's Grace? "Grace? She's right where she wants to be," the voice replied. "But you're not ready for the truth." "Not yet." My mind was spinning. "What do you mean? I don't understand. What truth?" The voice chuckled softly. "You will soon enough. But I wouldn't expect her to come back, Michael. Not the way you're hoping. Some things can't be fixed, no matter how hard you try." I slammed my fist against the steering wheel, frustration bubbling over. "What did you do to her?" There was another pause, this one longer. "Nothing yet. But you will. Soon." I was about to say something, to demand more answers, but the call ended abruptly. My hands were shaking as I stared at the screen, unable to process what had just happened. The words, "nothing yet," echoed in my mind like a warning, a threat I couldn't ignore. What was this person trying to tell me? And why did it feel like they were always one step ahead of me? I pulled over to the side of the road, my heart pounding in my chest. The city was still alive outside the window, people going about their business, unaware of the storm that was raging in my mind. I needed to think, to figure out what my next move was. But every time I tried to focus, my thoughts kept drifting back to Grace. Her face when she shut the door on me. The look in her eyes as if she was hiding something that was too dangerous to reveal. What had she gotten involved in? And who was behind all of this? I couldn't wait any longer. I needed to see her again, to confront her, to demand the truth. But I didn't know how to get through to her. If she had been hiding something this entire time, then what was I walking into? What was she keeping from me? I started the car again, my mind now set on one thing. I had to find Grace. I had to figure out what had happened to her, what she was hiding, and why it felt like everything I knew was falling apart. As I drove, my thoughts drifted back to the first time I had met her. We had met at a friend's party, of all places, and it had felt like something out of a movie. She was funny, smart, full of life, and we hit it off right away. It wasn't long before we became inseparable. Our relationship had always been easy, effortless, until now. I thought we had built something solid, something real, but now everything was unraveling in front of me. It felt like I was chasing shadows, always just out of reach. But I couldn't stop now. I couldn't give up. I had to keep pushing forward, no matter how dark the path ahead seemed. Something wasn't right, and I was going to find out what it was, even if it meant tearing apart everything I thought I knew. I just hoped that when I found the truth, I would be ready for it. Because deep down, I feared that the truth might be more than I could handle. I found myself back in front of the apartment building where Grace had once lived, unsure of how I got there. The city had begun to settle into the kind of silence that only happens late at night, the kind that fills the air with tension, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every streetlight seemed to flicker with a warning, the shadow of my car stretching out in front of me like a dark omen. I hadn't planned on coming back here tonight, but something had driven me, perhaps the unanswered call, the cryptic words still lingering in my mind, or maybe the note Grace had left behind. It had all been too much to ignore. I parked and sat there for a moment, the engine still running, my hands gripping the steering wheel as I tried to process everything. There was no more pretending, no more denial. I had to know what was going on. I had to know what Grace was hiding. There was no other option left. I wasn't sure what had pushed me to come here, but as I stepped out of the car and approached the entrance, something shifted in the air. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but there was an energy to the place now, a heaviness, like something had been left behind in the walls. My instincts were screaming at me to turn around and walk away, but I ignored them. This was the only place left I hadn't searched. I walked into the lobby, the door creaking behind me as I stepped through the dimly lit corridor. The smell of dust and stale air made the place feel even more abandoned than I remembered. The elevator seemed to hesitate before it began its slow climb to the top floor. My heart pounded in my chest, my mind racing. What was I expecting to find here? I wasn't sure, but I needed to find out. The elevator dinged as it reached the top, and I stepped out into the hallway. It was exactly the same as it had been the last time I'd walked down it. Same faded carpeting, same dim lights flickering overhead. But now, everything felt different. Every step I took felt heavy with the weight of the unknown. Grace's old apartment was at the very end of the hall, and as I approached, I noticed that the door was slightly ajar. I stopped, my breath catching in my throat. This wasn't like her. Grace had always been careful, always kept things in order. A door left open like this could only mean one thing. Something wasn't right. Slowly, I pushed the door open, the hinges squeaking in protest as I stepped inside. The apartment looked the same, but there was something unsettling about the way the light flickered across the room. The couch was still in the same spot, the bookshelf lined with books, and the coffee table cluttered with old magazines. But there was an emptiness here now, an absence of the life that once filled the space. It was as if Grace's presence had been erased, leaving only echoes of what once was. I moved through the apartment, searching for any sign of her. The bedroom door was open, and as I stepped inside, my heart dropped. Her things were still there, her clothes hanging in the closet, her jewelry neatly placed on the vanity. But it all felt distant, like someone else's life. It was then that I saw it, a small, nondescript envelope sitting on the bed. I walked over to it, my hands trembling as I picked it up. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable, Grace's. My breath caught in my throat as I carefully opened it, pulling out the folded paper inside. The message was short, but the words sent a chill down my spine. "I'm sorry, Michael. This is the only way. Please don't try to find me. It's better for both of us if you just let me go." The note felt like a slap in the face. Grace had never been the type to leave things unresolved. She had always been honest with me, even when it was hard. But this felt like a confession, an apology for something I wasn't supposed to understand. It wasn't just a goodbye. It was a plea for distance, for separation, for me to walk away and never look back. I felt a surge of anger rise within me. Let me go? How could she ask that? How could she just vanish without any explanation, without a single reason why? I crumpled the note in my hand, my chest tight with frustration and hurt. This wasn't how things were supposed to end. We had been a team, hadn't we? I couldn't just walk away and pretend that everything was fine. But then, just as I was about to leave the apartment, something caught my eye. A small, old photograph tucked behind the lamp on the nightstand. It was of Grace and a man I didn't recognize. They were standing close together, smiling, arms around each other, and the look in Grace's eyes was different. It was a look I hadn't seen before, contentment, maybe even affection, but it was a side of her I had never known. I stared at the photo for a long moment, the realization hitting me like a punch to the gut. Who was this man? Why hadn't she ever mentioned him to me? And why did it feel like this photo was a part of something I wasn't meant to know? I shoved the photo into my pocket, my mind racing. Grace had been hiding something, something big. And now, it seemed like I had uncovered the first real clue. The person in that photo wasn't just someone from her past. He was a part of her present, whether I liked it or not. I stepped back out into the hallway, the weight of the note and the photo in my pocket pulling me down with every step. I couldn't just let this go. I had to know the truth. Whatever Grace had been hiding, whatever she was involved in, it was all connected. And I was going to find out what it was, even if it meant tearing apart everything I thought I knew. I left the apartment building, my mind set on one thing: finding out who the man in that photo was. And more importantly, finding out what he meant to Grace. The pieces were finally starting to fit together, but the puzzle was far from complete. And the more I uncovered, the more I realized I was only scratching the surface of something far more dangerous than I could have imagined. The days after the discovery in Grace's old apartment felt like an eternity. I couldn't get the photo out of my mind. The way Grace had looked so content, so different, with a man I didn't recognize. It gnawed at me, pulling at the thread of something much bigger than I had ever imagined. My mind kept racing, searching for answers. and the more I uncovered, the deeper the hole seemed to get. But I couldn't stop. I had to know the truth, no matter what it was. I spent days tracking down the man in the photograph. His name was Adam. He had been a part of Grace's life long before we ever met, someone she had known during a difficult time, a period she had never really talked about. The more I learned about him, the more I realized how much Grace had kept hidden from me, how many layers of her life I had never seen. But Adam wasn't the villain in this story. He wasn't the enemy I had imagined. When I finally reached out to him, I expected the worst: confrontation, anger, secrecy. But instead, Adam was kind, understanding, and more than anything, he seemed as confused as I was. He explained that Grace had reached out to him recently, asking for help, for closure. They had shared a deep connection, a bond that had never truly been broken. But what surprised me the most was what Adam said next. "Grace was never trying to leave you, Michael," he said, his voice soft but firm. "She was trying to protect you. There were things in her past, things that she thought would hurt you, things she wasn't ready to confront. She left because she thought it was the only way to keep you safe from the things she'd been involved in." It was like a weight lifted off my chest. All the anger, all the confusion, suddenly it didn't seem so important anymore. Grace had never meant to hurt me. She had been running from her own fears, her own past. But in the process, she had pulled away from me, convinced that protecting me meant keeping me in the dark. I needed to talk to her, to tell her that I understood, that I wasn't angry anymore. So, I drove to the place where I knew she'd be, our favorite spot by the lake, the one we'd visited countless times over the years. When I arrived, I saw her sitting on the dock, staring out at the water. She looked lost, as if she were waiting for something to make sense. I approached her quietly, unsure of what to say, unsure of how to bridge the gap that had formed between us. But when she turned around and saw me, her face softened, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw her smile. A real smile, the one that had always lit up my world. "I never meant to hurt you," she whispered, her voice trembling as she stood up to face me. "I thought if I just kept pushing you away, I could protect you from everything I've been running from. But I see now that I was wrong." I reached out, taking her hands in mine. "You don't have to protect me, Grace. You never have. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. I just want you to trust me, trust us." Her eyes filled with tears as she nodded, pulling me into a tight embrace. It felt like the world had shifted back into place, like the pieces of our life that had scattered so suddenly were finally coming back together. "I was scared," she said softly, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "But I don't want to be scared anymore. I want to face everything, together." We stood there for a long time, holding each other, letting the silence speak the words we couldn't quite form. Everything was still uncertain, still fragile, but in that moment, I realized that we could rebuild, together. The trust, the love, the connection we had shared before, it was still there, waiting for us to find it again. In the weeks that followed, we took things slow, rebuilding our relationship one conversation at a time. There were still things Grace needed to work through, parts of her past that were difficult to face. But I was there for her, and she was there for me. Together, we learned to navigate the darkness, to heal from the wounds we had both carried. The road ahead wasn't easy, but it was ours. And for the first time in a long time, I believed that we could make it through anything, because we were in it together. The truth had finally come to light, and with it, the realization that the love we shared was stronger than anything that had tried to tear us apart. And as we walked forward, hand in hand, I knew that no matter what came next, we would face it side by side, stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever life had to offer.